Hey everybody!
Friends. We're here to do a tiny ad to invite you to check out our latest joint venture, and that is a podcast, which is what we're calling
Fandom Buzz, unsurprisingly the most.
So quickly tell them, what is Fandom Buzz exactly?
Right, so if Alexa Loves Books on this channel is pretty much us, you know, having book reviews and TBRs and book hauls, very bookish. The podcast is bookish too, and that's what I wanted to say. But think of it as like the break room for Alexa Loves Books. Like that's where all of the real feelings come out and all of the spoilers come out too. So it's pretty spoilery, pretty unhinged, still pretty PG, but definitely a lot of fun. So we do invite you to check that out.
A lot of fangirl and fanboy screaming.
Mostly fangirls.
Crying over there. So we hope you check it out. All of the other content that is non-bookish is also going to show up on there. So if you want to find out our thoughts on that, you should go over there. All the links will be down below. And now, on to our actual video. Hi friends! We're back for another What We Read
Yes,
video.
we are.
So we're gonna just jump right into
Jumping right into
we've
it.
got stuff to talk about.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about a couple of books, 3 in particular. I like them okay. They weren't standouts by any means. That's why they're all grouped together. The first book is Not the Girl You Marry by Andy J. Christopher. This was pitched to me as How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days except gender swapped. So
How to Lose a Girl in 10 Days.
Basically. Which I did not get when Mackie first said that to me, and I was like, what? It is about a journalist named Jack Nolan, and he is kind of unlucky in love, but he's also not doing so great in his career until he's offered the opportunity to write like this. He has to write this one piece about how to lose a girl in 10 days. No, it's not called How to Lose a Girl in 10 Days, but essentially like all the things you're doing wrong and why girls don't want to date you.
Exactly, it doesn't take 10 days. I know
Basically.
personally.
And then we have Hannah on the other hand, who is this extremely successful like events planner, but she's never given the big ticket wedding events because her boss is like, you don't like love, you don't believe in love. And so she has to find a guy to prove that, you know, she cares about this type of stuff. And so their paths cross, there's an instant attraction, and basically just imagine the rest of the plot of this romantic comedy and you probably got it right. I think this story was okay. I know a lot of people ended up not really liking this one, but I was just like fine with it. Like it was entertaining for what it was, and I read it pretty quick because the writing was easy to get into for me. I didn't particularly end up finding the characters memorable or the story very memorable because it does mirror a lot of romantic comedy plots. For me, generally when it comes to romance, I always try to look for the ones where the characters leave a very deep impression on me. And if they don't, that to me is already the sign of a romance that I'm just not gonna go for. And that's the case in this book. It's funny because actually the characters that stayed the most with me are Jack's family, and they're like so secondary in the story and have nothing to do with them. Like they sort of have something to do with the main plot, but not a big deal. Yeah, it was fun. If you are in the mood for maybe a romantic comedy in that vein, and you don't mind too much crass language and a plot that's fairly predictable, and if you're just looking for something to pass the time, you should check it out. I know it's so many caveats. But again, this is one of those books where I'd like borrow it, not buy it, so
cool.
Keep that in mind. A book that I liked a little bit more, but also still didn't love as much as other people have, is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This is a historical fiction story. So it's in a small town in North Carolina, and it is an investigation into the murder of a resident of that town named Chase Andrews, and a young woman named Kaya who lives in the marsh. She's lived in the marsh all her life. She's called the Marsh Girl, is being put on trial for his murder.
Oh.
And so the entire story explores both the murder trial as well as the history of Kaya and that small town. My favorite thing about this book, first of all, is the setting. I felt really transported down to the Carolinas, especially in the marsh area, which I don't know much about, but it felt like it came alive so much with her words and how she described it. And I also found myself very interested in Kaya as a main character. She lives in the marsh, she knows the marsh very well, and like seeing it through her eyes is sort of a romantic notion of it. Like she sees the beauty in it, even though it's so wild and it's like so, it can be dangerous in other aspects, but like there's something about the way she can see it and explain it to other people that makes it seem so compelling and so beautiful. It's about her relationship with the people in this small town which is not very far from where she lives in the marsh, and how complicated that can be considering her circumstances, considering the prejudice in that town. And that's all very fascinating to see put together. I also thought it was interesting to see how they would continue to dismantle this whole trial, like, and to prove that she's innocent. It was very like interesting. I will say that the plot itself is not very, it's not super action-packed. Like, a lot of things happen in it, but it didn't feel like one of those action-packed murder mystery-solving novels where, like, things are happening, clues are getting unraveled. It was more like a slow-paced, like, unfolding and explanation of this story and this mystery, and I also guessed at like how it would end. And I think like for me, like even though I was expecting that and that didn't in the slightest bother me to know that I could figure out what was going on, I think it was just not what I was expecting it to be, and in that sense I just didn't end up loving it as much as other people. I can see why people enjoyed it so much, and I also found it super compelling and still am glad that I read it. It's just not one of those books where I was like completely struck in the heart and love it so much the way other people do. So there's that one.
Fair.
And the last book I'm going to mention is one that I thought was really fun. I'm not sure that I would say it is a new favorite, and I know a lot of people have been saying that, so I'm just like somewhere a little bit below that. The book is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. Serpent and Dove is the story of a witch and a witch hunter who find themselves in an arranged marriage to escape certain consequences. And that's like the basic premise of this story, but there's also a lot going on outside of it in regards to the witch hunter, the witch hunters and what they're up to, and the witches and what they're up to. I don't know what I was expecting going into this one, because that premise is pretty much exactly what you get. You are getting a lot of quality time with this witch and this witch hunter, but I think I was expecting more magic and more action in it, and I feel like it focused a little too much on these characters and their romance, and like that's not a bad thing either, obviously, but at the same time,
it is if that's not what you're looking for.
But at the same time, like I feel like I was hoping that that would be a part of the plot, but also other things would be a part of the plot. And sure, there's like this whole like they're trying to find witches, kill them because they're not supposed to live, and they're trying to make sure to wipe that stain off the face of the earth. The witch hunters, anyway.
Bigots.
I just feel like what happens is in the beginning, it's really like exciting because like she's trying to make sure no one discovers that she is a witch. Her name is Louise, by the way. And then it sort of finds a lull in the middle after she marries him and she goes to live with him where the witch hunters live. There's like a lull there where they're like getting to know each other, and like she's trying to learn more about these witch hunters and how to dismantle them. And then all of a sudden the ending also picks up and gets super exciting. So I think the lull is the part that threw me off a little bit. So while I did end up liking this one, and I definitely found it diverting enough to just, you know, to just read it for like a couple of hours on the plane going to Australia, it was just fine. I am curious to see where it goes after the way it ends. And I will shout out that I do like seeing the two of them sort of learn more about each other and in effect grow as people. That part was pretty well done to me. Like, it took me a while to get interested in both of their stories, but once I was interested in their stories and their character growth, then it got more interesting. So if you're looking for a fantasy read that is a little bit heavier on the romance and characters than it is on like the plot, and if you want a story about witches and witch hunters, then you might want to check this one out.
Awesome.
All right, that was my first section. What are you talking about today?
Yeah, well, some of you have seen my What We Read, where I basically started The Lightning Thief again as part of writing accountability. One of my kids, who's now one of my writing kind of buddies, was like, hey, maybe we should study like how Rick Riordan does stuff. And I'm like, sure, yeah, that'll be fun. I haven't had a chance to read Rick in a long time. So I've kind of blasted through The Lightning Thief. But then that sort of turned into like a very deep Rick Riordan sort of like reading binge. And so I basically read everything. So in part one of my Rick Riordan reading binge, I read not just The Lightning Thief, but also the other books in the entire Percy Jackson series.
These pretty covers are from Juniper Books, by the way.
So here they are, pretty.
Very pretty.
Magnificent, gorgeous. You'll notice that these covers sort of like symbolize, like they have a little like,
oh, yeah,
logo for every single plot. So this one is like Sea of Monsters. You've got
Titan's Curse.
The Titan's Curse right here. You've got like the Labyrinth over here,
and
then you've got like it's called the Last Olympian, and you've got like the Empire State Building, because that's technically where Olympus actually is. For those of you who have not read Percy Jackson, it's a story about Perseus Jackson, who at the age of 11 discovers that monsters are after him, and he has no idea why. He's kind of dyslexic. Monsters are after him, he's not doing too well in school, he gets into fights, and then suddenly he realizes it all makes sense because he is actually a demigod. And meaning the gods have, dalliances with mortals, and they have kids who have powers, and that's attractive to demons, and demons just want to kill him. So what I never really realized about the Percy Jackson series is how Rick Riordan is able to capture the tumultuous kind of childhood era where you really think everybody's out to get you, where you absolutely have no friends, nobody understands you, you're not doing too well at school, and then suddenly he gives you this little dangle of hope. Well, it all makes sense because you're the child of a god. And then out of nowhere you get what you're hoping for, which is a place where you belong, which is Camp Half-Blood. That's where all of the demigods go so that they don't die. And at Camp Half-Blood you get what you need, which you didn't even know you need, which was how to survive everything trying to get you. And I have never felt...
That's the title of Percy's story. How to survive.
How to survive everything that's trying to go out and get you. And I have never...
Memoir by Percy Jackson.
And I have never felt more connected viscerally to Rick Riordan than this, because on the one hand you can dismiss this as it's another adventure story. There's a kid, then he has like a fellow demigods, and there's something special about him, and then he just becomes a hero towards the end. But then what you don't realize is that Rick Riordan actually gives even dyslexic kids, bless Uncle Rick, that it gives you that sense of purpose, that sense of explanation as to, well, you know what you think is a disadvantage can be actually an advantage, because apparently demigods, they're dyslexics because they're really only just geared towards reading ancient Greek.
Yeah.
They're your ADHD because those are your battle senses, so that you can so that you can't focus on just the one thing, because you're just focused on sort of many things happening in the heat of battle, people, things trying to get you. And in my head, I'm just like, this really does give you sort of like an escape. It gives, and more importantly, it doesn't just leave you in the realms of, you know, fantasy. It makes you just say everything that Percy does is you have to go face it. You have to go, whatever this thing is trying to kill you, we will arm you for it. Go take it on. And to me, I never saw that as you know, just blasting through this really, because by the way, it is a really cool story. Like, it's a great story. Please, like, if you enjoy the movies, good for you. But no, I mean, enjoy what you want, right? Watch it. I've seen, like, Alexis kind of like, you know, nieces and nephews just sort of just watch the Percy Jackson series over and over again on like video. I'm just like, sure, go have fun, kids. But what's underneath all of that is I never expected it to be like this kind of and again, the word I have for Rick Riordan is visceral. It connects to that very part of your childhood where you're like, why is all of this happening to me? And then to have a story where you're like, we will prepare you for what is to come. We will not lie to you as much as we can about how terrible it is. And guess what? You're the only one who can face this thing because it's your destiny. So I'm in. And so that's how deep the hole was that I dug in. In the next one we read, I'll be talking about the next few books that happened. And I used to think that I liked the next 5 books more than I like these. But now that I've reconnected to sort of like the essence of what the story is, I like them equally now.
Oh, nice.
And it furthers my theory that even if I couldn't connect to these themes, I know something subconscious in my lizard brain, you know, kind of connected to them anyway. And you really can't enjoy the next 5 books if you didn't know where you came from in these 5.
No way.
And that's what I feel, and that's why, for all of my disdain for the Shadowhunter series, you can't love anything else outside of the first 6 books if you didn't read the first 6 books, because that is your first foray into the world. Like, that's why you love them.
It's true.
And we're in and I want to end this with a nice fun rant of, we're in an era where suddenly series are a thing.
Like when series after series
after series are a thing, you know what I mean? You just can't divorce the future books that you may have liked more, but because they stand firmly on like the legs of, or the foundation of like the first few books. And so like, I didn't expect to love the Percy Jackson series even more than I already do. And I guess that's what read-throughs do for you. They just uncover more gems that you may have missed on the first 2-3 passes. So that's gonna be fun. So yeah, that's my bit. That's my bit.
2 more things to talk about. Well, 3 technically, but we're gonna count them as 2. The first one is something I also read digitally, and that book is The How and the Why by Cynthia Hand. You're gonna see the cover right here. This book is a quiet contemporary about a girl who is searching for information about her birth mother and dealing with her own feelings about her future and her relationships in real life. The thing I think that Cynthia Hand does so well with her stories is that she's always able to write these characters that pop off the page and feel so real and so relatable. They feel like people you could be friends with, or people you could know at school, and I think that, or in real life anyway, not just in school. And I think that's just such a gift for a writer to be able to do that. It's so great. The 2 that really stood out to me in the story are the main character, Cass, who is searching for answers about a lot of things in her life. She's a senior in high school, and that already brings about a lot of questions, but she is also adopted, and that also brings about a lot of questions for her. I found her character arc in this entire story so interesting and so fascinating, and her reactions and responses, while I didn't always love how she reacted to things, they all felt very organic to who she was, and I really appreciated that. And then there's her mom, her birth mother, who in this book you actually get her perspective because the book alternates between Cass in the present day and her mom writing letters to her unborn child. And it's fascinating because you get to see her personality in those letters and what she says and what she doesn't say. And that part to me was also very well done and very interesting. I think that the other thing that Cynthia had as well is that the story is not necessarily a loud one where a lot of big events happen.
Okay,
big
no,
logic.
I get that.
It is the kind of story where it could be anyone's story, like an ordinary person's story, and she still manages to hit all these emotional beats that will really like bring you deep into your feels, which is what happened to me. Like I was sitting on the plane to Australia, Mackie was like asleep next to me, and I was just like,
on brand.
I had like so many feelings, and I was just like, I'm gonna cry reading this, I want to laugh reading this. I'm just like, I'm desperately invested in the outcome of this story. And I think if nothing else stays with me in the future about this book, it's going to be that, the fact that it is the kind of story that it may be quiet, but the emotional impact that it has on the reader is so jarring and so good. The only other book that I can think of that had the similar vibe to me is Far From the Tree by Robin Benway, which is also a kind of story where teens are searching for answers about their parentage. And I think Cynthia Hand does a wonderful, incredible job telling the story. I know it's very personal to her as someone who is also adopted, so it was very good, and I would highly recommend checking that out.
Awesome.
So the last two things I'm going to quickly talk about while this camera doesn't, hopefully this camera doesn't die while I'm doing it, are Nevernight and God's Grave by Jay Kristoff. These are the first two books in the Nevernight Chronicle, which is an adult fantasy series. I feel like a lot of people still think it's YA. It's adult. That was a reread for me with Nevernight, and it centers around a character named Mia Corvier. She has her heart set on attending the Red Church, which is a school for assassins, because she wants to cultivate the skills in order to get revenge on the people who had her entire family imprisoned or executed. It's a good story. I had forgotten how good it was. I think I actually forgot or blocked out of my memory that the first 100 pages are super slow, and it's a lot of setup, and you're seeing a lot of like what led Mia to be who she is today. But once things pick up for her, I was just like into it and down, it all went downhill from there in terms of me reading this story. It's so fascinating to me because it's an assassin school story, and I think like the extremes that they go to teach assassins how to do things is so fascinating. I would never survive it, but it was so interesting. And I always forget how this one ends for some reason. I don't know, maybe I just blocked it out of my memory, but it was so good, so interesting. I love the character still, and I think the world is so fascinating. I will, as a side note, say that personally for me, I love the footnotes. I think they're such an interesting addition to the story because they give you more of the world without directly putting it into the actual narrative. So it's like a side note that you're like, oh, by the way, this is what that means. So he's basically telling you all these facts, and that should feel sort of feel like a, how do you say this?
It's telling more than showing.
It should feel more telling than showing. A little bit tedious, but to me they're hilarious because the way they're narrated is still quite hilarious based on the language.
That's fair.
So I think at the heart of the story is just Mia out to seek revenge because she has very deep feelings about the way her family was mistreated and how things turned out for them. But what it comes to is that Mia realizes there's something intrinsically wrong with the actual place that she's living in and how they treat everyone, not just her family. So it's a very good story. I was very enthralled, so I was really excited to finally pick up God's Grave. And I honestly had no idea about the plot going into this. I knew it would all include the fallout of the end of this book, sure, but other than that, all I could think of was that obviously she's still going to go after these people who went after her family, and she does. But also a lot of other things happen in this book that I was not expecting. It takes a turn that I was kind of like, it makes a lot of sense for Mia to do this thing, but at the same time, I'm like, I was not expecting that to be the method for her to get closer to her own personal goals.
Interesting.
And not only does that happen, but it actually opens up the world even more, and you learn more about the seat of power, you learn more about how the politics work, you learn more about how people are treated, especially people of different cultures in this story, and I think it's so interesting. In this one, I will say, and this is slightly spoiler, so if you want to just like skip for like 30 seconds, you can do that. But the setup of this one is tournament style. And it's so good. It's so good. I'm a sucker. Okay, I'm a sucker for like school settings in fantasy stories, but I'm also a sucker for tournament settings. And the tournament setting in this one was so like, it was so yummy. But yeah, I really enjoyed the story. I found it really funny because there were a lot of like fun commentary pieces in it. And I am interested to see what happens after that ending. I can see why everyone was so upset to have to wait for so long after reading this one, because the ending was brutal. Can't wait to read the third book, maybe before the end of the year, maybe not, who knows. Anyway, those are all the books that we have to talk about for this What We Read video. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you have anything to tell us about Percy Jackson, the Nevernight books, any of the books really mentioned in this video, we'd love to hear them. And we will see you guys in our next What We Read video. Bye!